Thank you, Angad. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for dialing in. Uh, I understood from Angad that some of the participants here might be actually interacting with Marcellus for the first time. So I'll spend the first 3 to 5 minutes talking about the philosophy, which hopefully majority of the participants are already aware of, and then maybe give a 10-15 minute update on where we see our portfolio positioned in this crisis. And the more questions you can ask, the better it would be, because we can, one way endless conversation is is not so exciting in a philosophy which is actually otherwise quite boring. So okay, so Angad, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. Can you allow me to share my screen? I'll just present PPT.
I'll just have that sorted. Just give me a moment.
So I'll continue in the meantime. So Marcellus, for those of you who are interacting with us for the first time, Marcellus is a firm which is only 1.5 years old. We were set up in December 2018. But the philosophy that we've been practicing at Marcellus is something that we've been practicing for the last 7 years now. Out of those 7 years, first half of this period was spent doing this philosophy for institutional investors as our clients, and we were part of a brokerage at Ambit. And the second half of this period was spent practicing this in a PMS construct, which Angad briefly talked about, where we did it at Ambit as a PMS for a couple of years, and now we've been doing it at Marcellus as consistent compounders. We published a couple of books on this same philosophy, which are Coffee Can Investing, which came out in 2018, and The Unusual Billionaires, which came out in 2016. So for those of you who want to understand the sort of foundation of this philosophy, these two books are the best way to start understanding it. And obviously, over the last year and a half at Marcellus, we've been publishing a lot of stuff: blogs, weekly blogs, monthly newsletters, a webinar once every other month. All of this is available on our website freely. You should go there and read through all of this. Before we started doing this at Ambit 7-8 years ago, we've spent our careers, again, the team has been working together since 2004 actually. So from 2004 to 2008 we did UK equities. In 2008 we came to India, and that's when we've been since then we've been doing Indian equities in our careers. The philosophy that we practice here is literally an outcome of our experience, of our journey over the last 12 years of covering India, where the first thing that we realized when we entered this country was that 70 to 80% of the listed universe here is a blatant accounting fraud, where whether it be the large cap companies, let's say today in Nifty 50 more than 30 such companies exist, and whether it be the entire BSE 500, forget about the small caps, even the best of not best, I mean even the largest of large caps have not got their accounts being published in a very clean manner. That obviously means that there might be several competent businesses in India. Those businesses will be very good for their customers, for their employees, for even the promoters, but they will not be the promoters won't be willing to share the competence of the business with minority shareholders. As a result, this aspect of staying away from accounting fraud is something that is that we are paranoid about, and that's been the first step okay, thanks Angad. So that's been the first step in approaching whatever we've done historically at our previous organizations as well as at Marcellus. So this is a quick summary of the 3 steps that we use to build a portfolio. The step number 1 is our forensic fraud detection from framework, accounting fraud detection framework, which we've published in our books as well. You should go through it. Last 12 years, we've refined it year after year. That obviously leaves us with hardly 80 or 100 clean companies outside within the BSE 500 to sort of work on. And the second step then, which you can see here as identifying companies with a track record of superior capital allocation and high barriers to entry, is actually a culmination of these two steps are a culmination of our experience that India is unique in one very special way, that this is the only large economy globally where there are several sectors with monopoly or a duopoly type of construct, in the sense that 80-90% of the profit of the entire sector would be sitting with one or two companies. For instance, let's say a Pidilite in adhesives, Asian Paints and Berger in paints, or Marico in hair oil, cooking oil, Britannia and Parle in biscuits, so on and so forth. And the unique aspect of India is that most of these monopolies or duopolies, they end up delivering returns on capital employed far higher than cost of capital. And this is a very, very important point to think very deeply about, because to begin with, return on capital and cost of capital differential is actually free cash flow that the business is throwing out. That's point number one. Point number two, in a free market, in a large market, in an efficient market, the wider this gap, the more competition it should attract, and competition will always narrow this gap down to as low as possible. Point number three, if you look at businesses in the Western context, the Walmarts, Carrefour, Daimler Chrysler, Toyota, all of these dominant firms, their ROEs are barely above cost of capital because of this sort of a competitive aspect attached to it. The next interesting thing then is that if you can, in India, figure out companies which can sustain this gap at a very wide quantum for several decades on end, then you are actually capturing a company which makes competition redundant. I mean, intensity redundant. To sustain a very wide gap of return on capital and cost of capital consistently for several decades on end, if macro was a meaningful driver of the competence that you are delivering from a franchise. Also, when it comes to, let's say, valuations, and I'm sure when we go into Q&A, there'll be several questions on valuations. Most welcome, please ask them. But when it comes to valuation, companies which can retain very high degree of return on capital, in a sense, are telling you that there is a way, not a certainty, but there is a possibility of building conviction around longevity of their competence, longevity of their free cash generation into the standard P multiple approach of banks. And hence, most such businesses, despite being large, they are not very well understood, at least in valuation terms. They are very cheap, right? Regardless of whether they are trading multiple. The moment you factor in longevity of these businesses, they are actually deeply discounted vis-a-vis their intrinsic value, if you were to call it that. So that's literally what our philosophy is. We want to pick up these businesses where their barriers to entry are unsurmountable by competition, where they make macro redundant, they make technology disruptions redundant, so on and so forth. And they just like in the coronavirus crisis, they are actually massive beneficiaries of sort of any sort of stress in the external environment. And if we can build our conviction on these sort of businesses, then this sort of a portfolio delivers very low degree of volatility in the fundamentals of these companies. And once fundamentals are healthy and less volatile, then the share prices also exhibit a fairly low standard deviation or fairly low degree of volatility. So for holding periods longer than 2-3 years, this portfolio delivers a standard deviation similar to that of a Government of India bond. And I'm not making it up. We've quantified all of this in our books. in our newsletters. You get 6-7% standard deviation of your return for a 2-year CAGR or a 3-year CAGR, which is 1/3 that of Nifty Sensex, and similar to that of a Government of India bond. So that's the philosophy, that's the approach. Very quickly moving on to the crisis that we're going through. So I'll keep it short and simple or unpredictable. Both the disease as well as the economic impact of that are. So I'll not harp about that. Honestly speaking, we don't know anything about the macro. We are not virologists. We don't know about the disease at all, and we really don't know how the next 2 months or 3 months are going to shape up for any part of the economy in general. The only thing that we know is that when it comes to our portfolio companies, all of our portfolio companies, let's first talk about non-financials on this slide, and I'll come to financials on the next slide. All of our portfolio companies are present in categories where the end demand is an essential product of low ticket value, consumed by middle class households and upwards on a day-to-day basis, because there's a utility element attached to it. These are not products which somebody buys once they get a big fat bonus or once they're feeling very good about life. For instance, let's say if I were to divide the non-financials basket into 3 categories. Category 1 would be, let's say, a Nestle, Abbott, Divi's Labs. These 3 are companies which are selling products which are actually in normal demand even during a lockdown period. So Nestle, for instance, is the only FMCG company which reported an 11% volume growth YOY for the March quarter. Mind you, there is no other FMCG company which has reported a positive volume growth YOY so far. Colgate, Unilever, Dabur, Godrej Consumer, so on and so forth. All of them have reported a volume decline. Nestle, on the other hand, has a 11% YOY volume growth. Abbott and Divi's are sort of monopolies in let's say, in the case of Abbott, in Thironorm, in Cremafin, etc. These are OTC drugs which are not going to get deferred in their demand just because there's a lockdown in the country. Likewise, Divi's is an API monopoly at a global level for cough syrups and painkillers, which again are day-to-day essentials. And hence, on the supply side as well, the manufacturing plants of these companies were not shut down. Their supply chains were running, albeit maybe with a 1 week or 2 week here or there in some areas, in some cases, but otherwise pretty resilient in the broad categories of consumption and supply chain for that first category, first bucket. Right. The second bucket that you can think about is a Relaxo Footwear, a Page Industries, or a Dr. Lal Path Labs, let's say, where during the lockdown period, you'll not get your annual health checkup or your good cholesterol, bad cholesterol balance checked from Dr. Lal, or you'll not buy the 130 rupee footwear or 150 rupee underwear of Jockey if there's a complete lockdown. But once the lockdown has been lifted, then a Dr. Lal will send the testing van to your home to collect the sample if need be. Jockey has its own website, which is actually attracting a lot of volume, and much before the rest of the supply chains and distribution mechanisms and the broader economy comes back to normalcy. People will start consuming these products, these services, and these companies will start delivering them. So in that way, again, the demand is not to begin with cancelled or destroyed. It is at best, at worst, deferred out by say 3 to 6 months, not more. The third bucket you can consider is an Asian Paints, Berger, Pidilite, where certainly over the next 6 months nobody's going to get their houses painted in as comfortable a manner as they used to before coronavirus, because the labor workforce can bring with it the risk of virus entering your house. And hence, there is a possibility that a large part of the consuming population of paints and adhesives will defer their demand out by more than 3 to 6 months, right? But here again, interestingly, when you look at, let's say, so people are raising their hands. I'll just take up all the questions. Give me 5 minutes. So when it comes to, let's say, paints, 85% of the country's paint demand for Asian paints, for instance, is repainting. Repainting is carried out in cycles for every household, which effectively means that, let's say, if there is a 10-year cycle on average in the country, then this year's customer for Asian paints was someone who repainted their house in 2010. Right? He will certainly maybe consider deferring the demand out by 1 or 2 years. But next year's customer is a totally different customer. He's not the same guy. And the next year's customer will perhaps not be deferring their demand of repainting their house by another 1 or 2 years, because by next year, we would have figured out a way to avoid the risk of virus coming in with the labor workforce. And hence, on a 2-year rolling basis, let's say, there will be a massive pent up and a catch up and normalcy of demand, despite the deferment for the first, say, 3, 6, 9 months period. So this is how I think the broader portfolio is resilient. Now, certainly there will be households which will go through a substantial reduction in their household income, because jobs will be lost, businesses will be shut down, salaries will be cut, etc. And hence, many such households will permanently cancel their willingness to go for an infant formula milk powder for their baby of Nestle because they can't afford it, or maybe an annual health checkup of Dr. Lal PathLabs, or repainting of their house, etc. So to that extent, maybe 5, 10, 15%, depending on different categories, will be the shrinkage in the pie overall for the next, say, year or two. But this shrinkage of the pie effect will be more than offset by market share gains for winning companies in every sector. And there will be massive polarizations in every sector, which you will see over the next 2-3 years. Some of the factors which are already evident that will drive this sort of a polarization, this sort of a market share gain for winning companies in every sector, and hence our portfolio companies, I think, are the biggest beneficiaries as a result of this, include working capital cycle support by extending extra credit, which, for instance, Jockey is doing, competition is not, for a variety of reasons, which you can ask me to go into details if you want in the Q&A. When it comes to, let's say, Dr. Lal PathLabs providing support to its franchisees by means of helping renegotiate rentals downwards with their landlords, that's not something a Metropolis or a Thyrocare is providing to their channel partners. The business models are different. They can't do all this. Their balance sheet strengths are different, so on and so forth. When it comes to even manufacturing setups, so let's say Page and Relaxo are in 2 of the most labor-intensive manufacturing industries. The entire competition for these 2 companies employs contract labor workforce, which would have migrated to their cities, to their villages. And this contract labor, migrant labor, will not come back to the cities or to the manufacturing plants very quickly. Whereas a Relaxo and a Jockey, they actually employ the entire labor workforce on their own payrolls. And there's actually no migrant labor working even on their own payrolls, because Jockey doesn't say, I'm opening a factory here and now let me get migrants to work at my factory. Jockey actually says, let me figure out a locality where there is enough supply of labor available. I'll go and open my factory there, and then I will pick up residents, not migrants, and they will become my employees, not contract labor. So with that sort of a setup, obviously manufacturing for these companies is back to normal already over the last 2-3 weeks, more or less, which is clearly not the case for the competitors. And even when it comes to, let's say, control over your supply chains, someone like an Asian Paints or a Berger, they actually own the depots, the warehouses, the entire front end, right down to the paint dealer level, which is not the case for a tiles company, for some other, let's say, a sanitary ware company in the home building material space. And that's a massive benefit again in the journey back to normalcy. On top of it, almost all of our firms have actually got technology investment as a central aspect to their competitive advantage. And that comes in very handy in a crisis like this, where operating efficiency has become even more important for you to not just survive, but also thrive through and after the crisis. And icing on the cake is the last bullet on your screen, which is Nirmala Sitharaman's free gift available to all our portfolio companies from last year's corporate tax rate cuts, which is not a gift available to their competitors in the same industry in the same magnitude, because our companies have had the highest returns on capital and hence the highest PAT margins. On top of it, they had the highest tax rates, and hence the tax rate cut had the highest rupees crore benefit for every, let's say, 100 crore of revenue that they generated vis-a-vis their competition, so on and so forth. So that's in a nutshell a framework to consider why our portfolio companies in many cases actually will be better off over the next say 2-3 years, including the lull period of a couple of quarters that they will witness now in the first quarter and the second quarter of the ongoing financial year. The next 2-3 years of FY, say whatever, FY20 to FY23, whatever you want to call it, that sort of a period, earnings CAGR will be, if not similar, if not better, at least similar to pre-COVID. In many cases, it will be actually better than what it would have been pre-COVID. That is not the case for the broader economy. So I'm not pushing the market. I'm not pushing India. This is only these sort of companies, right? When it comes to financials, again, very simple construct to pick up winners. Point number one, your lender should be able to survive through the crisis, no matter how high the NPAs go, how low the loan book growth run rate moderates down to. Because NPAs going up and loan book growth moderating will guaranteed happening. It is not even a high probability; it's a guarantee for a Bajaj Finance, for an HDFC Bank, a Kotak, and everybody else in the lending space. The difference between winners and losers will be there will be only a minority of very small segment of companies that will be able to, one, survive, and secondly have enough surplus capital on the liability side of the balance sheet to actually accelerate lending on the other side of the crisis, and hence consolidate market share gains in their industry by leaps and bounds, because lending will not stop. I mean, if someone thinks that a customer of HDFC Bank would have had their business shut down and hence the customer base for an HDFC Bank will go down, well, this effect will actually more than get offset by other customers who would not have required a loan because they were sitting on enough surplus capital to fund expansion. Coronavirus will eat into that surplus capital and they'll actually require a business loan, a personal loan, or some other sort of loan to grow their business. So that's sort of an offsetting factor. Net, I think lending will only grow and grow further over the next 3 to 5 years, and competitive intensity will be incredibly benign, because many lenders will either not survive or they will survive with very low strength of their liability side of the franchise once the crisis is behind us. And this sort of an effect of a winner benefiting from low competitive intensity in the aftermath of a crisis is something that these two tables on the screen in front of you have demonstrated from the past, from the history, where HDFC Limited example on the left hand side is from the 97-98 crisis. Just to emphasize how bad the crisis was at that time, 85% of NBFCs were shut down in a space of 18 to 24 months, and the count of such NBFCs was 52,000 plus. So 52,000 NBFC band ho gaye, and here HDFC Limited, obviously through the crisis you can see the bold parameters of HDFC Limited in 1998 and 99. They went through massive deterioration. The PE multiple, the 20 times PE went down to 8 times PE, very similar to what you might want to ask about Bajaj Finance. Its PE multiple has gone through a very similar sort of a decline. But just look at the next 4 or 5 years after the crisis. Towards the end of the 5-year journey, the ROE was at its all-time high for HDFC Limited. I don't think HDFC Limited ne aisa ROE kabhi dekha, kabhi suna, either before or after the crisis. Loan book growth was at its highest. Net interest margins expanded, so on and so forth. Right? That's exactly what HDFC Bank also experienced after a global financial crisis, and that's exactly what I think Bajaj Finance, Kotak, and HDFC Bank will experience over the next 3-4 years. So maybe I'll stop here. There are a couple of slides which can be used to explain timing, etc. Where I'm sure many of you might be thinking, why has Marcellus not taken a cash position? etc. Those of you who have gone through the crash with us can see this sort of a performance resilience as well in their portfolios, and hence it's touchwood yet again. We are glad we didn't lose our discipline to seek excitement by trying to time things, because you can't. Why did the market fall in March when it rose up in April? Why did it fall in the first half of May and it rose up in the second half of May? God only knows. We don't know, and we cannot forecast all of this. Why is it the case that Asian Paints, Pidilite, Berger are at their sort of near all-time highs? I mean, hardly 5-10% below, when it's quite obvious to see why that their demand will be quite adversely affected, so on and so forth. You can't time these things. 7 or 8 out of our 13 stocks in the portfolio are actually at levels much higher than their January levels, and hence our portfolio. So that was the first 3 months. This is portfolio performance for the first 5 months of the calendar year. Our portfolio for the first 5 months has been fairly resilient. As of today, compared to 1st of Jan, we are net positive. Despite the market being, I think, minus 20% or something compared to 1st of Jan. So that's the resilience. It's not surprising. This is the way our portfolio has behaved in the past as well. And people from Master Trust, when they were giving my introduction, I mean, it's good to know that reason why we were best performing in 2018 and 2019, because these were actually stressful years. When it's euphoria, we don't deliver much in a relative way. We deliver a healthy return in an absolute way in euphoria, but in a relative way, forget about being the best. We'll probably not even be in the top quartile of PMSs in this country. But in a stressful environment, when the market is under pressure, when fundamentals are under pressure, this sort of a portfolio delivers a lot of resilience. And going back to my comment on government bond type of a volatility standard deviation, that's pretty much the essence of this philosophy. So I'll stop here. Angad, do you want to moderate Q&A, or should I just read through all the questions?
I would be putting forth the questions to you.
Please.
Right. So we've already received some questions. So as you rightly said over there, I'll just like to add on to that point that I think when the going is good, everything is good. That's how it was broadly from 2013 to maybe beginning of 17 or the end of 17. And then the last 2 years, which have been very difficult, I think it's very easy to identify a strong strategy and a strong performance. So with that, as you had pointed out during your presentation also, there is obviously there are a lot of questions that we come across regularly from clients on the traditional parameters that you use to discover the value in a stock. So typically a lot of your stocks are very high PE and PB multiples. So what is the reply to those people? How do we answer those clients that why is it that it's still okay to enter at such high levels?
Okay. So I'm just pulling up a different presentation pack, which straight away answers this question, and I'll take you through that. So, okay. Okay, so let's just understand this PE multiple, the animal called PE multiple, a little deeper, a little better. Yeah, this mathematical equation cannot be debated against. Even Bhagwan bhi nahi kar sakta hai iske against koi debate, right? So this is true. E and E cut gaye, P is equal to P, LHS equal to RHS, right? So in a way, the share price of any stock is a combination of two factors, right? One is the PE multiple, which does not compound over time. It largely doubles or halves. So Sensex, Nifty, I think the bottom of PE band is 12, 13, 14 times. Top is 28, 30 times. I think in its entire history, Nestle, Asian Paints, HDFC Bank, they're largely doubled, halved their PE multiples, right? 20 to 40, in some cases 40 to 20, or 30 to 60, 60 to 30. In some rare cases, it becomes 3x or 1/3. But largely, the PE multiple is a stagnant factor, which at max might give you an opportunity to double or halve in this equation, right? Whereas the earnings can be a compounder if you pick up the right types of stocks. So let's just see how this equation then plays out for different types of companies. This is where I'm taking three examples. So on the left, I have divided, let's say, the type of company that you might end up buying in a portfolio into three buckets. Bucket number one is a company which has absolutely zero pricing power, right? So let's say airlines globally or telecom in India, to a certain extent, telecom globally, you can call it, not largely. Where subscriber-based addition or number of passengers flying in aircrafts has been going up forever at a rate of 25-27% for aircrafts and 40-45% for telecom subscribers over the last couple of decades. But rupees crore revenue of market leaders like Bharti Airtel in periods without much of competition like 2005 to 2015, rupees crore revenue, rupees crore earnings kahin jata hi nahi hai, right? Stagnant. So there's no pricing power as such. By the way, Interglobe Aviation's market share, Indigo Airlines market share over the last decade has gone up from 10% to 50% mota moti, and its rupees crore earning FY10 to FY20 is the same, right? So for these sorts of companies, right, what can happen is the best outcome of this equation can be a doubling of PE multiple and zero earnings compounding, right? Even that is an unhappy outcome. The smiley on the right is intentional. It's an unhappy outcome, right? And obviously, if you are unlucky and you capture halving of PE, right? I'm talking about a 10-year window here. You can do the same maths for a 5-year, 7-year window. You should not do a maths for 1-year or 2-year window because that's not investing, that's speculation. So for a 3, 5, 7-year or 10-year window, if you capture doubling of PE, gives you maybe 5 to 10% positive CAGR. You capture halving of PE, minus 5 to minus 10% CAGR contribution. Earnings zero gives you the share price movement in an unsatisfactory trajectory. Whereas if you pick up a normal good company, right, and genuinely no disrespect, these are very good companies. Unilever, Maruti, let's say an L&T, Sensex, Nifty. Bulk of the winners in S&P 500, which someone like, let's say, Warren Buffett has picked in his life. These companies, they deliver low to mid-teens earnings compounding, right? Which is the 12% that I've picked up here. Although Sensex, Nifty haven't delivered low to mid-teens over the last 10 years. It's been more like a 7-8%. But yeah, let's say 10, 12, 15% is the earnings compounding that you can expect from these, right? If you add PE doubling on top, you get into 19, 20, 21% type of a territory, which is very satisfactory. That's what actually Warren Buffett has done. He's picked up a Goldman Sachs in 2008 at the bottom, and American Express in 73 at the bottom, Washington Post when it was close to bankruptcy, Coca-Cola before the global expansion, so on and so forth, right? So he's added the plus 7% of PE multiple on top of a 12, 13, 15% type of an earnings compounding, and hence he's delivered a 20 plus share price compounding for his clients, right? If you get the PE multiple wrong in this equation, then obviously the outcome is unhappy, and hence you have to time things well, right? By the way, Warren Buffett doesn't time things from a 1-year, 2-year perspective. He's time things from a 10, 20-year perspective. But what India has is this category C, which is not found in the Western context, and it is not found beyond, say, 20-30 companies even in India, right? These companies, and as I explained to you, this is unique to India. These companies have the ability to chug out a 20%, 25%, at times 30% earnings compounding decade after decade, regardless of competition, macro, etc. Right? And I've given the names of our portfolio companies. Most of them fall in that category. All of them fall in that category, right? For these companies, in this equation, the PE multiple movement becomes redundant, right? So you double your PE for these companies, you're happy. You halve your PE for these companies, you're unhappy. You are still happy, sorry, right? So the PE multiple movement has been made redundant. Mind you, there is no dividend included in this. If you add dividend to the whole equation, then obviously the category C is dividend paying. Category A doesn't pay dividends. They don't have free cash, and hence you can actually do little higher numbers as well, 1-2% higher. Now, what this means is when it comes to, let's say, okay, let me ye acha hai na. So let's go through some phases, right, that we've had in our stock market. So this was one type of a phase, right, where P multiples for everything, they sort of expanded. BSE 100 ka bhi upar gaya, Asian Paints ka bhi, HDFC Bank ka bhi, sabka P upar gaya, right? But you can see that the alpha in earnings for an Asian Paints or an HDFC Bank versus BSE 100 was the same as the alpha in share prices for an HDFC Bank or an Asian Paints versus BSE 100. So this is euphoria, right? In the euphoria, this is what history has taught us, right? Let's look at this. This is a broad-based earnings growth. I think over the last 1 year, people who've written about and talked about bubble in quality, and there have been several fund managers talking about it. I mean, with all due respect, there might or might not be a bubble in some types of stocks, but what happens to genuine quality, not perceived quality, genuine quality, in a broad-based earnings growth as well, even if that were to come, broad-based earnings growth anytime in the foreseeable future to begin with, but मान लो आ भी गया, right? So FY04 to 2008, right? You saw BSE 100 deliver earnings CAGR of 22%. I mean, that's like na kabhi dekha na kabhi suna type of earnings CAGR for the index itself, right? 22% compounding for the index. Genuinely, at that time, I mean, an Asian Paints or an HDFC Bank gap, the alpha of earnings vis-a-vis the index shrunk, and hence the alpha of the share prices vis-a-vis the index also shrunk. But the alpha was still positive, and it still made sense to only stick to quality, right? In a broad-based earnings growth. ठीक है ना? So पहला हमने देखा euphoria 2014 to 19, ये वाला है broad-based earnings growth. ठीक है? इसमें भी कोई फायदा नहीं हुआ quality को छोड़ के कहीं और जाने का. अच्छा, then let's look at this, where the PE multiples, they literally went into a gutter, right? So for BSE 100, PE multiple went from 47 to 16. And look at Asian Paints, HDFC Bank, ITC, Nestle, all of their PE multiples more than half, right? But still, it made sense both in an absolute way as well as in a relative way to hold these stocks in your portfolio rather than put your money in fixed deposits, right? And obviously, it didn't make any sense to invest in the stock market in general, right? BSE 100 gave you a 5% CAGR over that 10-year period. So and this is a combination of all these periods, right? So in a way, what I'm trying to say here is, regardless of what happens to the broader environment in future, whether the market is in euphoria or in stress, whether the economy is in euphoria or stress, the only way, both in an absolute and a relative way, the only way to compound wealth that we found for ourselves is sticking to genuine quality. Genuine quality will always come at rich PEs, but as I said, these rich PEs will be significantly undervaluing the longevity inherent in these franchises, and that's the reason why when it comes to this equation, in this equation, you're not disappointed even if you enter at 50 times PE multiple on whichever company you want to pick up, right? So another data point, 25 years ago as well, Nestle was trading at 65 times PE, Asian Paints was trading at 40 times. By the way, I had that data ना, आपको ये दिखाया मैंने. देखिए 94 के PE देखिए, इस वाले चार्ट में, they are not too dissimilar from the PE multiples that you're seeing now. So just saying कि ये ना कभी देखा ना कभी सुना वाले PE है, it's not that. Actually 2001 to 2004 was the only period when the PE multiples of an Asian Paints or an HDFC Bank or a Nestle went down to less than say 40 times or 35 times, right? Otherwise, after 2005 and before 2000, the PE multiples of Asian Paints, Nestle were always above 35, 40 times, 45 times. ये जाते ही नहीं 20 times पे, तो what's the point of waiting for that?
Right. So Rakshit, talking about Asian Paints specifically, so today it's at about 1.6 lakh crore compounding. If we take your expectation into account, compounding at about 20-25 odd percent over the next 10 years, will take it to a value of about 12 to 13 lakh crore,
Okay.
which is broadly unprecedented, not seen in most parts of the world, nowhere in the larger economies than India. Do you expect that to happen? I
Okay.
think
So
would grow at a similar rate as well.
I'm glad you're asking these questions. I have ready-made answers. A second, I'll just go to. In the meantime, let me also share the screen. Share screen. This one. Okay, so this, let me go to newsletters, and there was a newsletter we published on 1st of December, and yeah, this newsletter answers your question. I mean, title से ही आपको थोड़ा सा समझ आ जाएगा. This is exactly the question you're asking, right? Are they too big now already? Now just look at some data. पहले आपको डराने वाला डेटा देते हैं. So ये डराने वाला डेटा है. So Relaxo footwear manufactured and sold 18 crore pairs in FY19, and this volume is compounding at a 10-15% CAGR. ठीक है, देश की पूरी पॉपुलेशन 125 करोड़ है, रिलैक्सो एक्सपोर्ट करता नहीं है. दिस इज ऑल डोमेस्टिक कंजम्पशन. वो 20 करोड़ बना रहा है देश में 125 करोड़ की आबादी में 20 करोड़ एक साल में वो बेच रहा है. तो आप सोचो कितनी जल्दी वो सैचुरेट हो जाएगा, राइट? HDFC Bank is as big as JP Morgan Chase, right? HDFC Bank's loan book size is similar to that of JP Morgan Chase. No, sorry. So JP Morgan Chase is only 7 times larger than HDFC Bank. And if HDFC Bank compounds, and this is the question you're asking about Asian Paints in a way, if HDFC Bank compounds at 20-25%, तो JP Morgan Chase को एक डेकेड में ही क्रॉस कर जाएगा. और हम यहाँ पे लॉन्जेविटी फैक्टर इन कर रहे हैं किस बात की, राइट? Bajaj Finance, you can see पिछले 10 साल में कहाँ से कहाँ पहुंचे. You can read this text, right? So Asian Paints likewise you're saying. Now that's the डरावना way to look at it. Now अभी relaxed way में देखते हैं इस चीज को. तो relaxed way में देखते हैं. Relaxo is in an industry, footwear industry, which is 45,000 crore, 50,000 crore in revenue, compounding at 13-14% CAGR, right? And Relaxo is only 2,500 crore. तो अभी अब रनवे देखो कितना लंबा है. और ये 40,000 crore जो नंबर में बोल रहा हूँ, 45,000 crore, this is domestic footwear consumption. I'm not talking about manufactured and exported, right? So this is domestic footwear consumption. Relaxo is only 5-6% of the footwear industry in India, and hence there's a massive runway to increase this market share to a much bigger number. HDFC Bank और Bajaj Finance का देखते हैं. So यहाँ पे ना एक चाइना का हमने कुछ एक इंटरेस्टिंग सी चीज डाली थी. So China में there are 4 banks. कहाँ गया, कहीं पे डाला था हमने. So the top 4 banks in China, right, are all 10 times bigger each than HDFC Bank in their loan book size. So हम JP Morgan देख के डर सकते हैं कि 10 साल में HDFC Bank will be as big as JP Morgan if Marcellus' expectations are met, or if Marcellus meets the outcome. I mean हमारी expectation कोई क्यों meet करेगा, हम दूसरों को meet करेंगे. But the other way to look at it is China में ICBC and I think 4 banks हैं, the top 4 banks, they are all 11 times bigger each than HDFC Bank in their loan book growth, in the loan book size, right? So उस तरह की चीजें हैं, and hence it depends on how you look at it. So one way to look at it is this डरावना version कि Relaxo 20 करोड़ चप्पल बेच रहा है, जूते बेच रहा है. इंडिया में इतने पैर नहीं है, इतने पाँव नहीं है, तो कितनों को पहनाएगा. और बियॉन्ड अ पॉइंट आप वार्डरोब में ऑन एवरेज 5 पर पेयर से ज्यादा तो करोगे नहीं, तो कहाँ जाएंगी ये चप्पलें सारी, राइट? दैट्स वन वे टू लुक एट इट. The other way to look at it is, अरे Relaxo is in 45,000 crore category with 2,500 crore revenue, and out of that 45,000 crore, only 20-25% is organized. Rest 70-75% is unorganized, and unorganized is actually at the heart of the destruction of this crisis. They will not be able to survive. Both brick and mortar to e-commerce shift as well as unorganized to organized shift is going to make a Relaxo footwear expand its market share by leaps and bounds, and hence why worry, right? So likewise for Asian Paints, average repainting cycle today is 9.5 years for all households that Asian Paints paints, right? 85% of, as I said, revenue of Asian Paints is repainting. Only 15% is new housing. So it's not about the real estate demand. It's about repainting cycle compression mainly, right? The number of households itself is going up by roughly 4-5-6% CAGR. That's the volume. On top of it, if you add repainting cycles compressing from say 9.5 years down to 6 years over the next 15-20 years, that 3-4 year compression over the next 20 years is going to give another 4-5 percentage point CAGR to the volumes. So expecting 10% plus volume for the industry itself, and within that, then Asian Paints a little better because of market share gains, and then operating efficiencies, and then working capital compression, etc. Why should the engine stop? I don't see it.
So Rakshit, then obviously there's one part of the story, other companies that you're investing in. But what about generally speaking, there's so much negativity suddenly, all around. When you talk of India, you talk of the GDP growth numbers, you talk of some tensions brewing on multiple borders now. And even if you talk of globally, there's stress in US as well, civil unrest. So what message do you have for investors who are sitting on the sidelines, wanting to invest, but just because there's so much negativity, they're not sure whether now is the time, or, so just a message for them, because people are confused. People are sitting on money. So on one hand, they see markets having corrected by about 30-35%, in the month of March, end of March, wanting to invest because of the sentiment all around. They're not sure whether they should or not.
Okay. So I'll give you two scenarios to sort of position yourself in, let's say scenario one, you are sitting in America investing in American equities. Scenario two, you're sitting in India investing in Indian equities. आपको क्या feel होगा, right? क्या feel होगा, तो you explained in the question क्यों वो feel होगा. So let's understand that. So let's say if you're sitting in America, right, you don't do stock picking, you just invest in S&P 500, right? S&P 500 delivers twice the nominal GDP growth of that country, and it's incorrect to assume that this is because S&P 500 is an export oriented and hence exposed to emerging markets which are faster growing. Ye wo falana dikna. That's not the case, right? When it comes to demand, S&P 500 is largely Western developed market oriented index. It's not a Africa oriented index, right? So S&P 500 has been delivering 9.5 to 10% CAGR, which is twice as much as the nominal GDP growth, actually higher than twice. So without stock selection itself, you are getting a survivorship bias in the index, because the index is of high quality and you are sort of making decent. Space, right? So that's also so listed equities in India, when it comes to, let's say, BSE, Sensex or Nifty, they are not even delivering nominal GDP growth in this country. Nominal GDP growth in this country is 10-12%, and Nifty, Sensex in their best times they deliver that, right? Over a 10-year long term I'm talking about. 3-4 साल आए थे वो, मैं जैसे बताया था 22% CAGR एक आध बार आ गया था, but otherwise it's 10-12% that Nifty, Sensex deliver in a country where nominal GDP growth is also the same, right? So to begin with, there is no survivorship bias that you're getting out of investing in broader market, quote unquote. Okay. And why again, as I said, सारा तो accounting fraud है, तो Reliance Industries कितना भी पैसा बना ले, minority shareholder को मिलता था जब तक धीरूभाई अंबानी चला रहा था, मुकेश अंबानी के दौर में नहीं मिलता, right? So on and so forth. Now, the second point is when it comes to, let's say, panic, right? Which is also a factor, not just fundamental. When it comes to panic, तो वो panic को कम रखने का तरीका in America is simple, that it's a country where the currency is a reserve currency. Every stimulus can be only a downside protection rather than a downside creation. Whereas in a country like India, I mean, this economy cannot just keep printing money to save the economy from collapsing, because a very large fiscal stimulus here will actually sort of depreciate the currency so badly that the country will go down the cleaners. What's bearing in mind, which is the driver of panic. So as a result, in India, panic and hence FII flow, DII flow, ये सब वो सब flow-oriented stock movement is a lot more accentuated compared to what it is in the Western economies. Western economies में भी है flow का effect, but वहाँ पे relatively calm है compared to India. That's the second point. Now comes the third point. This third point is something that we published in a blog in the month of May, very recently, 3-4 weeks back. Gaurav published a blog where India is becoming increasingly polar an economy, and if you were to quantify this aspect, if you take the top 20 in this country, those top 20 corporates 2 decades ago used to contribute to 15% of the entire corporate profitability. Today, these top 20 corporates contribute to 70%, 70% of the entire corporate profitability of this country, right? Only 20 corporate, right? And things like coronavirus are only going to further will become bigger, the strong will become smaller, and weak will become weaker, right? So as a result, when you invest in the market, quote unquote, right, आपको top 20 के beyond और भी बहुत कुछ मिल रहा है, right? Which is weaker franchises that are not so profitable. They are probably scaled up and hence part of an index, but they are not amongst the top 20 corporates, so on and so forth, right? So that polarization effect also is something that you should bear in mind. And hence, I mean, you ask for an advice. My simple point, be very clear in your head what investing. Are you picking up stocks or are you buying the market? If you are picking up stocks, then the market question doesn't apply. If you are buying the market, then the market is adversely affected by these three factors. One, broader fundamentals are not very healthy vis-a-vis nominal GDP growth for the market. Two, panic drives share price volatility a lot more for the market. Three, you've got polarization underway, which the market will not benefit out of, but a small subset of the market will benefit out of. So if you really want to make money without your blood pressure high, you have to think about high quality companies, not think about valuations, not think about factors which are not in your control. They are good talking points in a social gathering when you meet somebody in a lift and you say, मैंने 100 रुपए पे खरीदा था, 200 रुपए पे बेच दिया. That's all excitement. That's not the way to make money, right? I mean, so let's be a little clear in our head. You're buying companies which cannot get disrupted. That's it. You're not buying companies जिनका FII flow के कारण entry point पहले कम था और बाद में ज़्यादा, and you're trying to capture that.
Right. So I have a question from, I think, someone who's gone through your book as well. So what he says is, while the coffee can portfolio for the average investor has been suggested to be of a 10-year duration without change, would you suggest a periodic review within these 10 years? If so, how would you suggest the average investor to go about it?
Okay, so again, be clear about two things. One is the DIY, which we've laid out in the books. And the other one is actively managed, which we do as a PMS, right? To begin with, they're poles apart. They're totally poles apart. I mean, Nestle never formed part of the DIY, Pidilite, Asian Paints. They're not part of the DIY anymore, right? Pidilite never was. Asian Paints was, but abhi nahi. So there's a reason why the DIY is actually totally different from active management. Both deliver. Both deliver. The manual intervention obviously has delivered and should deliver in future as well a better performance than the DIY. Otherwise, the manual intervention one will not exist. It will be made redundant by the DIY. But both will deliver a healthy outcome. When you're doing the DIY, please keep your mind shut. You don't have to do any monitoring. You don't have to involve any psychological aspects. You don't have to do any research. You just have to look at the last 10 years of financials, formulaic basis, make a portfolio. Each year, you will have one portfolio completing 10 years, exit out of that. Each year, you will be entering into one portfolio, which will start its journey of 10 years. And there will be 9 other portfolios, which will be somewhere between 0 and 10 in terms of their duration, and you will hold on to them. Just let it be. A couple of companies will go bankrupt. A couple of them will become, as they call it, multi-baggers, right? So let that portfolio be untouched. उसको आप मत छेड़िए, कोई monitoring, rebalancing कुछ नहीं करना है उसका. अगर आप करेंगे तो more often than not you will actually end up losing part of the performance. When it comes to what we don't do any filter-based approach beyond forensic accounting, right? In forensic accounting, we have a few filters to throw out dodgy stuff. But beyond that, there's no filter. This is purely day-to-day, minute-to-minute research-oriented portfolio construction, and it's only the conviction of the analyst on the stock that can help you keep psychology at bay, right? And secondly, do justice to companies which for some reason didn't make it to the DIY, or those which made it to the DIY but don't deserve a place in a pure consistent amount of your portfolio, right? So if you don't go very deep, then it won't be of any use. So a shallow monitoring, आप ना इधर के रहेंगे ना उधर के रहेंगे. Either do DIY where you don't have to do monitoring, or do paranoid research where you cannot sit comfortably if Aditya Puri is retiring on an HDFC Bank just because HDFC Bank has been so great. Right? You have to be paranoid about what is the new leader doing at HDFC Bank after Aditya Puri has gone, and whether you should be exiting from HDFC Bank or retaining it in your portfolio.
So that tempts me to ask you that question. Are you retaining HDFC?
Yeah, we've actually bought more. We've bought more of Bajaj Finance and HDFC Bank because their share prices, once they fell, they went outside the tolerance band of our model portfolio weights. So for clients where the stock allocations went below the tolerance bands, we bought more of these by selling other stocks which went above the tolerance bands.
Any specific reshuffle in the portfolio during the past 2 months?
No, nothing exited, nothing added in the last 5 months. The last one was we sold Marico in end December, early Jan, and added Divis. That was the last chart.
Right. So also, Rakshit, can we touch upon specific sectors now? I'm getting a few questions. So, financial services as a whole, there's hardly been any credit offtake. Banks have hardly lent out any money over the past year or so. Add to that the loan moratorium. How do you think that's going to impact the sector as a whole?
Sector as a whole very adversely affected from say 3 to 6 month perspective, even 12-month perspective. There'll be several companies. I think that list has already started developing now. About a month ago, I was reading some 19 plus 14. 33 companies had sacrificed their licenses. NBFCs had given back their licenses to the RBI. कि हमसे ना हो पाया. This sort of a list will continue. There'll be many others who will probably survive because of capital infusion, etc. Because their NPAs will shoot through the roof and their capital adequacy ratios are not high enough. Their surplus liquidity is not high enough to absorb those NPA increases. And there'll be the HDFC Bank, Kotak, Bajaj Finance types where NPA certainly will go up, loan book growth will moderate, their profitability YOY will be in a decline for a couple of quarters, but they'll be very comfortably able to absorb absorb the brunt of this crisis on their balance sheet. And 12 months out, I think you will see. I mean, it might happen even 6 months out, but I'm saying at least 12 to 18 months out, you will certainly see the winners in the lending space accelerating their lending. Overall, credit growth will come back to normalcy 1 or 2 years out. So I don't see any challenge in that. I mean, India is not dying. There's life beyond the crisis. There'll be banking beyond the crisis, etc. So that's how you have to just be aware of stock specific positive negatives.
Right. So I have another question coming in from one of our participants. It says, what's your view on chemical as a sector? There are talks of global giants shifting their base to India from China. Do you see it as a sunrise sector, or the story is more or less done for now?
Okay, so let me give you a bit of a context first, and then specific answer to specialty chemicals, because this is, for some reason, specialty chemicals, ये वाला question जो आपने पूछा, this has become probably one of the most frequently asked question of the last 1 or 2 months in every webinar. So क्या होता है, let's say again going back to पहले एक बारी telecom करते हैं, फिर airlines करते हैं, फिर hand wash, sanitizer, सब कुछ करते हैं. So let's say 2002 to 2017 आप 15 साल का period पकड़ो for telecom industry. There was a 44% CAGR in subscriber base addition, right? So it was a sunrise sector in the best possible manner, right? Sunrise क्या था, वो तो मतलब आंखें चुदी आ जाए, इतना sunrise था, right? 44% CAGR in subscriber base, right? Most exponential growth curve ever for any category across the world. Did that mean that the customer benefited? Yes, he did. Did that mean that they were let's say marketing agencies which got contracts for adverts from telecom industry? Yes, they did. Technology firms which provided support, they benefited. But shareholder benefit absolutely zero, right? क्योंकि वो market leaders ने भी पैसा नहीं बनाया, return capital नहीं बनाया, right? So just because you were in the sunrise sector doesn't necessarily mean as a stock price or as a shareholder you will make money. Certainly, when the euphoria, psychological euphoria was on, Bharti Airtel, I think 2002, 3, 4, 5, वो 3-4 साल बहुत ऊपर किया, बहुत अच्छा किया, right? But that was temporary because it was not backed by fundamentals, and eventually वो ठप हो गया, right? Share price भी ठप हो गया, सब ठप हो गया. So, and this is pre-Jio, by the way. Don't confuse this with Jio disruption. This is not about Jio. So Jio के पहले की कहानी है. Likewise, there will be, let's say, the hand wash industry, the hand sanitizer industry, the hygiene industry will see exponential growth, right? But does that mean Unilever will see the same degree of exponential growth? Only if Unilever has a very high pricing power. अगर पतंजलि जैसा आदमी आके 40% सस्ते में साबुन बेचने की हिम्मत कर सकता है और Unilever की profitability को एक साल के लिए compromise कर सकता है, तो that's exactly what will happen. I mean, अभी Asian Paints, Berger और I don't know, और एक दो और बड़ी weird सी कंपनियों ने भी hand sanitizer बनाना शुरू कर दिया है, right? So sunrise sector है hand sanitizer, but is any shareholder making money in hand sanitizers? No. Likewise, you have to look at every other sector. Now, specialty chemicals might be a competitive advantage wala sector. I don't know. Honestly speaking, I haven't researched on PI Industries and all those, I think Vinati Organics and our team hasn't spent too much time understanding them. And honestly speaking, we take at least 1.5-2 years on average, if not more, to understand a particular company. And hence it will be few months before we understand these companies well. So you have to figure out the competitive edge of these companies rather than just looking at the sector as a sunrise sector or not. Maybe they are the Asian Paints of their sectors, and hence PI Industries will not just benefit from the sunrise aspect of the sector, but on top of it, they'll even strengthen their competitive position maybe. But don't just take it for granted कि China से India shift हुआ तो बले बले, right? It doesn't happen like that. To begin with, China to India shift will not be a mega shift. It will be there to some degree, but I don't see why India can suddenly replace China in cost of manufacturing, in scale of manufacturing, etc. India can't. So in some areas, in some sub-segments, there will be that China to India shift, but be very careful about competitive advantages of companies rather than the sunrise element of a sector.
Right. So, another question, since you have a liking for monopolistic companies and exclusive companies, one that we see is not to your portfolio is maybe any company from the entertainment sector. Any specific reason? Maybe a company like a PVR or an Inox Leisure, has it ever qualified in your criteria?
PVR was in our coverage universe till a few years ago, but we see a possibility of massive disruption coming through in the sense of OTT or Netflix. We don't have a clear answer whether that disruption will come through or not, but that creates a massive uncertainty because PVR is certainly not a firm which is getting geared to ride the new wave, if at all the new wave to come. Right, so that's one main reason. Plus, I mean, we haven't.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, sorry about that disruption. I think we are facing some internet issues. For any questions that remain unanswered, please get in touch with us. You can drop in an email or contact your relationship manager within the organization. Rakshit, thank you so much. Always a pleasure connecting with you and having you over. Thank you so much for sparing time for us today.